A quiet man in first class, a flight attendant with a snap judgment, a seat that sparked a storm, and a single phone call that would cost an airline $550 million. What would you do if someone humiliated you in front of a full cabin? Simply because of the way you looked. Would you shout back, walk away in silence? Or would you wait, calmly, silently, and change everything with a single move? This is the true story of Silas Grant, a soft-spoken passenger who boarded Flight AS-377 looking like just another old man in an oversized coat until the crew's harsh treatment revealed more about them than him. But beneath his quiet eyes was a past the airline never expected and a future it never saw coming. What happens when power doesn't come dressed in luxury? When wealth wears humility instead of a Rolex? And how can one young flight attendant, caught in the middle, rewrite the meaning of dignity at 30,000 feet? Stay with us as we unfold a story of judgment, justice, and a runway that was never meant to be walked alone. If this story moves you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Let's take off. The terminal buzzed with voices, sharp heels against marble, boarding calls echoing off distant speakers, and the occasional hiss of rolling luggage. Gate 32C was alive, like any other weekday morning at O'Hare International. The gate agent's smile was mechanical, the coffee burnt, but for Kendra Miles, none of that mattered. First class was her sanctuary, her temple, and nothing disrupted the order of it. She glanced at her watch. Flight AS-117 to Vancouver was already boarding pre-boarding groups. A trio of suited executives in their 40s were first to strut through, flashing platinum tags and murmuring into Bluetooth earpieces. Kendra tugged at the sleeve of her pressed uniform. Not a wrinkle, not a hair out of place. She'd worked her way up over 15 years to run this cabin. Her cabin. And her expectations were as high as the cruising altitude. Then came him. A man in 70s. Maybe older, walked slowly but deliberately to the front of the line. He wore soft slacks, a cardigan buttoned up neatly, and what looked like a time-worn pair of Oxfords. A small leather satchel hung over his shoulder, and he held a paper boarding pass in one hand and a cane in the other. Kendra's brows rose before she could stop herself. The man gave a gentle nod. "Morning," he said in a voice that was calm, low, and sure. He stepped toward the boarding lane. Kendra raised a hand. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, her tone firm but polite, the kind of voice that had no patience for confrontation, but even less for disorder. "This lane is for first class and executive platinum passengers only." The man looked down at his pass, then back at her. "Yes," he said, simply, "Seat 1A." Kendra tilted her head, scanning the wrinkled paper ticket. Her eyes narrowed at the gate printout, rather than a phone screen, a paper pass for 1A. She held it for a beat too long, just enough for the line to begin noticing. "You're sure this is correct?" she asked, tone slipping slightly. Have you flown with Aerosky?" before the man just looked at her, not coldly, not even with offense, just looked, and then, with the smallest nod, frequently, and always in 1A. Kendra's jaw twitched. Still, she stepped aside. "Of course, sir. Welcome aboard." He moved slowly but steadily down the jet bridge. Behind her, a teenager near the back of the line whispered, "Dang, that was awkward," and nudged his friend. "Already recording." Kendra forced a smile as the next boarding group began, but her thoughts trailed after the old man. Who walks onto a premium flight with a cardigan and a paper ticket? Who doesn't check in digitally? Who still uses a cane in 2025 and insists on one? Her gut twisted. She didn't like anomalies. Not on her plane. Not in her cabin. as she boarded behind the last first-class passenger. Her eyes scanned the row. There he was, already seated, already buckled in. The man was scribbling something into a small leather-bound notebook. Not an iPad, not a MacBook, not a device in sight. "Would you care for a welcome drink?" she offered, curbing her voice back into professionalism. "Just water, please. No champagne juice." He smiled softly. "No, thank you, miss." She nodded and turned away, unable to shake the unease building behind her eyes. The first-class experience was built on curation, on appearances, expectations, performance. This man didn't match any of it. He didn't perform. He didn't posture. And that, somehow, unnerved her more than a drunk executive ever could. She passed the galley, pausing to whisper to Talia Rhodes, the young attendant still relatively new on international routes. "Who checked in the gentleman in 1A?" Kendra asked under her breath. Talia looked surprised. "I did. He was polite. Said please and thank you. Very soft-spoken. Why, no reason." Kendra lied, but the reason buzzed under her skin like static. She looked back toward 1A. He wasn't rich-looking. He wasn't influential-looking. But something about him whispered power, and Kendra didn't like whispers. Silas Grant sat motionless in seat 1A, his hands resting calmly on the worn leather notebook he'd just closed. The gentle rumble of the jet bridge detaching signaled that the cabin was now sealed, locked in with a mix of business travelers, vacationers, and one flight attendant who couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. Across the aisle in 1B, a younger man in a sleek navy blazer, Miles Huxley. Kendra would later learn, glanced at Silas's notebook curiously. "You journaling?" he asked with a chuckle, adjusting his Rolex as if to make it more visible. Silas turned to him, expression unreadable but not unkind. "In a way," he said, "it's good to write things down. Helps one remember what matters." Miles smirked. "I guess. I use my phone for everything now. Easier." Silas only nodded, gaze returning to the window. That was when Kendra passed by again, pretending to do a final check. She stole another glance at Silas. He wasn't out of place by accident. He was choosing to be out of place, and that felt like a challenge. She moved to the galley and began preparing drinks. Her fingers worked methodically, but her mind wandered. Why did this man unsettle her so much? He'd done nothing wrong. Polite, quiet, yet... Her thoughts were interrupted by Talia. "Want me to take this round?" "No," Kendra said quickly. "I'll serve first. You take main." She picked up the tray, her stride composed, her voice smooth. "Mr. Grant, here's your water," she said softly, placing the glass down. Silas met her eyes and smiled gently. "Thank you, Ms. Miles." Her breath hitched. She hadn't told him her name. "Do we know each other?" she asked, the edges of her voice sharper than she intended. "No," he said simply, "but I make a point to learn the names of the people who serve others with care." That sentence sat heavy in the air. For a moment, Kendra felt exposed, as though the man could read her frustrations, her hunger to be respected, her fear of losing control. She forced a nod and moved on. Midway through the flight, turbulence rocked the cabin. Not much, just enough to make drinks slosh and trigger some gas in the main cabin. "Remain seated," Kendra instructed through the PA. "We'll resume service shortly." She walked down the first-class aisle, checking seatbelts. Miles in 1B complained loudly. A little shaky. I've flown better." Kendra offered her corporate smile. Silas, meanwhile, sat serene. His hand rested lightly on his notebook. Not a flicker of concern crossed his face. Kendra studied him for a long second. "You're very calm," she said. Silas looked up. "Worry doesn't make the wings steadier. It only weakens the soul." She blinked. No one had ever spoken like that on her flights. Businessmen barked about mergers. Tourists whined about delays. But this man spoke in weight, not words. Before she could say anything more, a notification pinged in her pocket. She stepped back into the galley and checked it. It was from the gate manager back at O'Hare. "Hey, Kendra. Quick note. Was there someone in 1A named Silas Grant?" Her heart thumped once. She typed back, "Yes. Older gentleman. Why?" There was a pause. "Then do not mistreat him. That's all I can say. You'll understand soon." Kendra stared at the screen. The hairs on the back of her neck rose. Later, when she passed back through the aisle to refresh drinks, she noticed something odd. A small envelope sat on Silas's tray. Her name, Kendra Miles, was written on the front in pen. Delicate cursive, old-fashioned. She hesitated. "May I?" she asked. He nodded once. "It's yours." Kendra picked it up and opened it behind the curtain of the galley. Inside was a simple folded note. "There is strength in dignity. Not everyone will see it, but some always do. I hope you're one of them. Gee." She read it again and again. A lump formed in her throat. Uninvited. And that night, Kendra would lie awake in her hotel room in Vancouver, and she would wonder why a single man with a notebook, a cardigan, and a quiet voice had shaken the core of everything she believed about power, class, and perception. But for now, 35,000 feet above the world, she returned to her cabin and tried unsuccessfully to shake the feeling that Silas Grant was not a man to be underestimated. Not at all. The soft hum of the engines had become a kind of lullaby across the cabin. Most of the first-class passengers had slipped into their post-meal doze, reclining their seats, eye masks on, noise-canceling headphones humming with ambient rain or jazz, but not Kendra Miles. She stood in the galley, sipping lukewarm coffee she didn't want, trying to push down the rising tension in her chest. The note, the look in his eyes, the way he'd said her name without being told, and now the message from O'Hare's gate manager. It was all adding up to something, and Kendra hated not knowing what. She peeked past the curtain again. Silas Grant was awake. Still as ever. Just looking out the window at a sky so blue it made your heart ache. He wasn't checking a device, not reading, not sleeping, just being. Back at the front, Miles Huxley stirred. "Excuse me," he called. "Is it possible to get another blanket? The air's a bit chilly." Kendra nodded and retrieved one. When she handed it over, he leaned closer and whispered, "Seriously, what's with the old guy?" She raised an eyebrow. "Pardon. The guy in 1A. He hasn't moved. He hasn't used a screen. Who travels first class and doesn't have an iPhone?" Kendra's jaw tensed. "I suggest you focus on your own seat, Mr. Huxley." Miles scoffed and laid back. "Whatever. Just saying, people like that make me nervous. You never know what they're hiding. It was the last straw." She walked quickly to the galley and messaged the gate manager again. "Who is Silas Grant?" The reply came instantly. "You really want to know?" "Yes!" A moment passed. Then another message. "He's the founder of the Airline." Kendra stared at the screen. The words didn't compute. Wait. Aerosky's founder, Silas Grant, is alive. He's flying first class with us. He owns 51% of the company. Hasn't flown commercial in years. Used to run evaluations in secret. Rumor was, he stopped after his wife died. I guess he's back. Why didn't anyone tell me? because he doesn't want special treatment. If you treat him badly, that is the test. Kendra leaned back against the wall. Her heart thudded. A strange mix of fear, admiration, and shame twisted inside her. She'd nearly denied him boarding, questioned his ticket, scrutinized his appearance like he didn't belong. And yet, he had shown only respect, grace, poise. She returned slowly to the cabin, her eyes drifting again to seat 1A. As if he sensed her, Silas turned his head slightly and met her gaze. He smiled. There was no malice there, no arrogance, just understanding. And for Kendra, that was worse. At 35,000 feet, reflection can hit harder than turbulence. Kendra moved through the cabin mechanically, checked on passengers, refilled water, adjusted headsets, but inside, she was unraveling. What did it say about her that she only saw worth in suits and sleek phones? When had she started measuring value by appearances, and how many people had she treated unfairly, simply because they didn't fit the mold of success? She remembered being young, just starting out in the skies, back when she believed dignity came from kindness, not control. When had she changed? She didn't notice her hand trembling until she spilled some water on the tray. As the flight neared Canadian airspace, the captain's voice came on. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be beginning our initial descent into Vancouver shortly. Please ensure all seatbacks and tray tables are in their upright and locked positions." Kendra moved to Silas's seat, bent slightly. "Mr. Grant," she whispered. "Yes, I owe you an apology." He looked at her, surprised. "For what?" "For assuming, judging, treating you as less than." Silas considered this. "And what made you change your mind?" Kendra hesitated. "I learned who you are." He tilted his head. "And if you hadn't," she swallowed. "I'm not proud of that." Silas nodded. "That's where change starts, in the not being proud." The cabin dimmed slightly as the descent continued. The clouds thickened outside. A light vibration passed through the floor. Then he added, "But here's the secret, Ms. Miles. Power isn't in what others think of you. It's in how you treat people when they think nothing of you." Those words would stay with Kendra long after the wheels touched down. Touchdown was smooth, too smooth for how heavy Kendra Miles' thoughts had become. As the wheels kissed the Vancouver tarmac, the cabin erupted in small routines. Seatbelts clicked, passengers stirred, phones lit up. But for Kendra, the landing felt like a judgment. She had descended not just through cloud layers, but through the layers of her own illusions. Silas Grant, in seat 1A, hadn't moved. But something in the air around him had changed. Now that she knew who he truly was, the founder of the very airline whose wings bore them skyward, she saw every movement differently. Not as eccentric, but intentional, measured, wise. As passengers gathered their belongings, Miles Huxley was first to rise, already on his phone. Yeah, wheels down. Vancouver. No, the flight was decent. Crew was all right. Though, get this, some old guy was in 1A the whole time. Looked like he wandered on from the past. Kendra heard it. Silas did too. He didn't react, but Kendra did. She moved closer to Miles. "Excuse me, sir. Please keep your voice down, and be mindful of how you speak about other guests." Miles raised an eyebrow. Scoffing. "It's a public plane, isn't it?" "It's a shared space," she corrected, calm but firm. Silas stood up now, folding his cardigan over one arm. As he did, he looked Miles square in the eye. "Politeness," he said gently, "is free, but it reveals who we truly are when nothing else is left." Miles blinked, speechless for once. Talia arrived at the front galley. holding her phone. "Kendra," she whispered, "you need to see this." She held the screen up. It was a live streamer recording of the flight, uploaded mid-air by a main cabin passenger who had overheard Kendra questioning Silas's presence at boarding. A few hours ago, it would have been a minor misunderstanding, but now that the internet knew he was Silas Grant, the founder of Aerosky, it had gone viral. Silas Grant flight was trending. Dozens of comments flooded in. How could they question a man like that? Shows you how ageism and classism intersect. She didn't even know who he was. Embarrassing. Let this be a lesson in humility. People like Silas built the world while we scroll through it. Talia looked pale. What do we do? Kendra stared at the screen, her throat dry. We don't panic. But inside, her stomach twisted. The video had captured everything. The initial suspicion, the cold tone, the lack of trust in a man whose only crime was not performing wealth the way others expected. As passengers disembarked, Silas paused at the door. Kendra stood beside Talia, her posture impeccable, but her heart pounding. Silas offered a gentle nod. "Thank you for the service." Kendra met his eyes. "Mr. Grant." But he held up a hand. "You already apologized. Ms. Miles, what matters now is what you do next." She swallowed hard. "Will there be consequences?" Silas tilted his head. "For you? That depends on what." He smiled. "On whether you let this moment define you or refine you." Then he stepped through the jet bridge and vanished from sight. Kendra exhaled deeply, leaning back against the galley wall. Talia watched her with concern. "Do you think corporate knows yet they will soon?" Just then, her work tablet pinged. Incoming, urgent message from Aerosky HQ. She opened it with trembling hands. Silas Grant was aboard AS-117. The incident is now public. HQ is requesting an internal review of all actions. Crew feedback interviews scheduled. Await further instructions. Media inquiries are to be directed to the PR team only. Talia let out a low whistle. This is going to be rough. But Kendra nodded, strangely steady now. "Yes," she said, "and maybe." That's what we needed. That night, in the hotel lobby, her colleagues murmured nervously about what would happen. Some blamed the passenger who filmed it. Others blamed Silas for not disclosing his identity. But Kendra said nothing. She wasn't interested in blame anymore. She was thinking about what Silas said at the gate. Power isn't in what others think of you. It's in how you treat people when they think nothing of you. That line echoed louder than the jet engines ever had. And tomorrow, she'd walk into the review meeting not as the perfect flight attendant, but as a woman finally ready to see people really see them for who they are, not what they wear or where they sit. The conference room was plain, windowless, and too bright. Kendra Miles sat in a stiff-backed chair at the end of a long gray table at the Aerosky Vancouver base. Her uniform was immaculate, her posture straight, but beneath the pressed fabric and calm exterior, her stomach churned. The HR officer Darla Singh clicked through a presentation projected onto a screen. Beside her sat Simon Cho, the West Coast operations manager, and a corporate communications rep named Laura Kim. Everyone wore the same strained expression, the kind people wore when the words PR incident were floating just above their heads like toxic smoke. "Let's get to the point," Simon said. "This video has been viewed 4.7 million times in 17 hours. Kendra stayed silent. Laura added. "The public doesn't see a misunderstanding. They see discrimination. They see condescension. And unfortunately, that perception is becoming our brand." Darla leaned forward. We're not here to punish. Not yet. We're here to understand. Kendra took a slow breath. I saw a man who didn't match the usual profile of our first-class passengers. I asked him questions. I didn't do it to belittle him. I did it to ensure security and accuracy. But I didn't check my own bias first. The room went still. Laura blinked. That's refreshingly honest. It's also why I need to be here. Kendra continued. I can't undo what I did, but I can change what I do next. And maybe that's more important. Simon closed the folder in front of him. Silas Grant has not issued a statement, he said, but his silence is loud. Kendra frowned. What do you mean? Laura replied. When a billionaire doesn't retaliate, people assume it's because he's watching, waiting. Darla glanced down at her notes. There's something else. Simon cleared his throat. He was scheduled to attend a private board meeting in Seattle next week. Instead, he's requested a return flight from Vancouver, on the same crew, same attendants, same route. Kendra blinked. He wants to fly with me again? Simon nodded slowly. It's not protocol. It's personal. That night, back at the hotel, Kendra stood by the window in her room. Vancouver glittered below, a constellation of streetlights and soft fog. In the distance, planes circled overhead, tiny flickers of motion in a quiet sky. She thought of Silas, his silence, his smile, that powerful, quiet grace, and the decision he'd just made. He didn't want revenge. He wanted reflection. He wanted her to fly with him again. Kendra pressed her hand against the glass and closed her eyes. How many people ever got a second chance like that? And more importantly, would she be brave enough to earn it? Back at HQ, the marketing department was in chaos. They were tracking sentiment, patching leaks, preparing possible apologies, but the numbers didn't lie. Public support for Silas was enormous, and more shocking support for Kendra was rising too. Some viewers had gone back to rewatch the video, noticing how she'd later treated him with dignity. Others praised her public acknowledgement of her mistake. One video clip off her saying, "I'm not proud of that," had gone viral on its own. Now a new hashtag was emerging. Do better, fly better. People weren't just angry, they were hopeful. They wanted change, and they wanted Kendra Miles to be part of it. The day before the return flight, she received an envelope under her door. Inside was a single page, typed, Dear Ms. Miles, I believe a flight crew isn't judged by how they serve the easy passengers, but how they handle the unexpected ones. Tomorrow, we'll try again. Not to relive what happened, but to rise above it. Yours, S.G. She read it twice. Then she folded it carefully and tucked it into the breast pocket of her uniform. This time, she would be ready, not for perfection, not for performance, but for something more difficult, presence. The gate at Vancouver International buzzed with quiet anticipation, not because of a celebrity, not even because of a delay, but because everyone on staff knew Flight AS-118, the return leg to Chicago, would carry Silas Grant once again. And more importantly, it would carry Kendra Miles. She stood at the gate counter, uniform crisp, voice calm as she ran through safety checks with Talia Rhodes. Cabin pressure system updated verified, ground service cleared done, and, You okay? Talia asked gently. Kendra smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. I'm focused. As passengers began to board, Kendra kept her posture straight and her tone warm. Seat 1A remained empty for most of boarding. Then, just before the final call, Silas Grant appeared. This time, there was no confusion, no hesitation, Only a quiet nod from the gate agents and stunned silence from nearby onlookers who recognized his face from news clips. He walked slowly but confidently, cardigan draped over one arm, carrying no luggage. As he stepped into the cabin, Kendra greeted him first. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Grant." His eyes met her calm, intelligent, unreadable. "Ms. Miles," he said simply. "Shall we fly?" As Silas settled into his seat, something shifted in the cabin. Crew who had once dismissed him now observed with hushed reverence. Passengers, some unaware, took note of how the staff seemed to orbit around him slightly differently than others. But Silas wasn't demanding. He declined champagne. He asked for still water. And when Kendra returned with it, he accepted it with the same 4 words that had followed her since the last flight. "Thank you for seeing me." Halfway through the flight, turbulence began to rock the cabin, not sever just enough to cause mild unease. As Kendra walked the aisle to reassure passengers, she noticed an elderly woman's, Hargrove, growing nervous. Her hands trembled, her lips pressed tight. Kendra kneeled beside her. Bumpy air, that's all, like potholes in the sky. But the woman shook her head. "My husband. We were flying when he had his stroke. I never fly anymore. But my daughter insisted I come see my new grandbaby. Now I think I made a mistake." Kendra gently took her hand. "You didn't. You came for love. That's never a mistake." Back in 1A, Silas watched the scene unfold. Later, as Kendra passed his seat again, he spoke without looking up. "You're different." She paused. "I'm trying to be," she said. "No," he said, finally lifting his eyes. "You already are. Trying is what people do when they want to be seen. Changing is what they do when they want to see others." The words sank in like gravity. "I judged you," she admitted. "The first time?" "You did," he agreed. "I'm still ashamed of it." "You should be." Silence. "But you should also be proud. Not of where you started, but of where you're choosing to land." Later, during meal service, Silas declined food. Kendra hesitated. "Is there anything you'd prefer?" Silas chuckled lightly. "You know, the best thing I've ever been served on a flight was a ham and cheese sandwich from a flight attendant who genuinely smiled when she handed it to me. I'm guessing that's a rare combination these days. Rarer than it should be." She went back to the galley, prepared the simplest sandwich she could, and walked it back 2 hands, one warm heart. This time, when she handed it over, she smiled fully, and Silas smiled back. After landing at O'Hare, Silas waited at the aircraft door as passengers disembarked. He turned to Kendra. "I've spoken with the board," he said quietly, "about you." Her breath caught. "What for? I don't believe punishment teaches as well as proximity. You're not a liability. You're a mirror." She furrowed her brow. "What do you mean?" "You reflect the moment. You made a mistake, and then you modeled growth. Our airline needs that more than perfection." She didn't know what to say. So he left her with this. "This time, you flew with me. Next time, you lead." And then he was gone. Kendra Miles sat alone in the break room 2 days after Flight AS-118. She still wore her uniform creased from morning briefing, not from flight, and held a steaming cup of weak coffee that had gone cold without her noticing. It wasn't the kind of silence that begged for noise. It was the kind that invited reflection. Her phone buzzed. Internal memo subject Miles. "Kendra." She opened it with a small knot in her chest. Effective immediately. Flight Attendant Kendra Miles will be reassigned to Aerosky's Training and Culture Division. She blinked. Another line followed, appointed by executive request from Silas Grant. She stood still for a moment. Not fired, not suspended, not hidden, promoted. The next few weeks moved like weather-slow fronts of skepticism, pockets of turbulence, and sudden gusts of change. Kendra was flown to Seattle, Phoenix, and Atlanta to speak to different flight crews. Not to lecture, to listen, to unpack bias, to talk about what it feels like to be both the mistake and the mirror. One afternoon, she sat before a crew of seasoned attendants in a Dallas conference room. One of them, Terry Voss, a 20-year veteran, spoke up. "You're brave, Miss Miles, but this feels like damage control, not real change." Kendra didn't flinch. "I thought that too. At first," she said, "but then I realized damage control assumes the damage is over. What if we're still causing it? Every time we let bias go unexamined, every time we assume who deserves to sit in 1A." The room went quiet. Then slowly, heads began to nod. Meanwhile, Silas Grant made no public statement, no press appearances, no company-wide announcements, but his influence was felt in subtler ways. A new initiative called Fly Forward was launched, mandatory for all crew, focused on empathy and equity. The Aerosky hiring portal quietly removed facial photos and names during first-round screenings. Even the first-class training manual was updated with a note from Silas on the first page. "Your passengers do not owe you a performance. You owe them a presence." The public noticed. Travel blogs, aviation forums, even morning news shows. They talked about the flight attendant who was almost canceled and became a catalyst. Some called her the redemption hostess. Others called her Sky Mirror. But Kendra ignored the names. She kept showing up, kept listening, kept changing room, not with charisma, but with conviction. Then one evening, back in Chicago, she got a text from Talia Rhodes. "Guess who's flying AS-117 again tomorrow?" Kendra's heart skipped, not because she was nervous, because she knew what she had to do. She wouldn't be flying, but she would be at the gate. The next morning, Kendra stood by as Talia welcomed passengers. And then he came Silas Grant, again dressed simply, again without an entourage. But this time, he paused. "You're not on this flight," he said. Kendra smiled. "Not this time. You're not avoiding me. I hope." She shook her head. "I'm planting seeds," she said softly. "This isn't about me anymore. It never was. It's about who's watching now." Silas looked at her. Something in his gaze softened approval, perhaps, or understanding. "Then let them watch," he said. "Let them learn." And he boarded. As the plane pushed back, Kendra stayed at the terminal window, hand on the glass. A single aircraft in motion, 1,000 lives inside. And from one small act of dignity, a sky full of change. When Silas Grant boarded flight AS-117 this time, something felt different. Not with the crew. They were polite, professional, even slightly reverent. Not with the passengers. First class was a mix of business travelers and quietly curious eyes. The difference was in him. For the first time in a long time, Silas wasn't watching for failure. He was watching for proof. Proof that systems could bend without breaking. That hearts could change when given the right reason and the right opportunity. The new lead flight attendant, Monica Reese, was younger, sharper-edged in tone, but trying. Silas watched her interactions, noted her pacing, listened to her tone. She didn't gush or overcompensate, but she asked more than she assumed. That was enough. When she approached his seat, she greeted him by name. "Mr. Grant, may I offer you a warm towel or still water before takeoff?" He nodded. Still water would be perfect. "Thank you." She returned, hands steady, eyes direct. No games, no guessing. For a man who had once been offered peanuts and judgment, this small grace felt enormous. 2 hours into the flight, cruising at 37,000 feet, turbulence struck hard. The seatbelt sign pinged. The aircraft jolted twice. Monica's voice came calmly over the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. Flight crew, secure the cabin." Silas had experienced worse. But across the aisle, a young girl Harper, no older than 6, clutched her mother's hand and began to cry. Her mother whispered comfort, but her own hand shook. Silas caught Monica's eye as she passed. He gestured gently toward the child. Monica nodded. After securing her cart, she knelt beside the girl. "What's your name?" she asked softly. "Harper," came the tearful reply. "I get scared sometimes, too," Monica said. "But want to know a secret." Harper sniffled and nodded. "The pilots flying this plane are trained to fly even through the bumpiest skies. They know how to find the smooth air." "Really?" Monica smiled. "Really. And I'll stay right here for a bit if you want." Harper didn't speak, but didn't let go of Monica's hand either. Silas turned back to his window. Beyond it, clouds stretched endlessly, their shadows shifting like quiet thoughts. He remembered the early days of aero sky. Long hours, empty seats, small contracts, and one stubborn belief that dignity could be built into flight not just as a luxury, but as a right. He had hired people who believed the same, then watched as profit pressure, status envy, and routine indifference crept in like rust. And now, at last, it was being scrubbed clean, not by him, by the very people who had once failed him. After the turbulence passed, Monica brought him a fresh drink. "I wanted to thank you," she said quietly, "for what you started." He raised an eyebrow. "I didn't start it." "You did," she insisted, "even if you didn't plan to. Your patience, it gave the rest of us a second chance." He considered that. "My silence," he said slowly, "wasn't patience. It was a test. For all of us. And did we pass?" "You're still flying," he said. "So yes, you're beginning to." When the flight landed, Silas waited until the aisle cleared. Before disembarking, he looked Monica in the eyes. "Take care of them," he said, motioning to the cabin. "Every single one." She nodded. "I will." That evening, back in his Chicago townhouse, Silas stood at the window. Below him, planes blinked red and white in the night sky's mall, fast-moving points of connection. He pulled out his old flip phone, still scuffed from years of quiet power. A message blinked, "New training module approved. Kendra Miles leads Cohort 1. He smiled, then typed back, "Let them soar." The next morning, Kendra Miles stood at Gate 52B in O'Hare International, watching passengers file onto Flight AS-249A mid-range route to Salt Lake City. She wasn't flying today either. She was observing. The new class of flight attendants, a diverse mix of ages and backgrounds, was already aboard. They had no idea who she was, only that a senior training consultant would be riding jump seat for the first leg. She liked it that way. Less theater, more truth. At the same time, Monica Reese sat in the crew lounge in Denver, typing up her post-flight report. The section marked passenger interactions lingered blank for a few minutes before she slowly filled it. Passenger in 1A exhibited calm, respectful behavior throughout. Unspoken leadership presence noted. Offered support to a distressed child. No requests for special treatment. Served as a quiet anchor during turbulence. Then she paused. Added one more line. Reminder we serve people, not profiles. She hit save, closed her laptop, and exhaled. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Aerosky's executive analytics team met in London. The numbers were clear. Customer satisfaction among first-class passengers had risen 22%. Incident reports involving discrimination or bias dropped by 31%. Internal crew feedback showed a surge in morale after the introduction of the new Fly Forward initiative. But one analyst, a junior named Elijah Wren, had questions. He pointed to a spreadsheet. Most of these shifts are tied to crew behavior. Not logistics, not pricing, not perks, just behavior. Correct, replied a director. It's human, and it's scalable. Elia sat back. So we've been fixing the wrong part of the plane all this time. The room fell silent. Then, one by one, heads began to nod. Back in Chicago, Kendra joined the cabin crew debrief after Flight AS-249 touched down. A young attendant, Bria Collins, looked frustrated. That man in 3C the hedge fund guy rolled his eyes every time I spoke, like I was beneath him. Kendra listened, then asked gently, "How did you respond?" I stayed polite, but inside, I was furious. I wanted to say, "You have no idea what I've seen in this uniform." Kendra smiled softly. "And that's exactly why you didn't say it. Because you do know." Bria looked at her. "Is it always going to be like this fighting?" Not to fight back, Kendra's voice turned quiet, almost reverent. "No, but until the sky changes completely, we become the proof that it can." Later that night, Kendra returned to her apartment. She brewed a cup of mint tea and sank into her old couch. The television was off, the lights were dim, but her mind was alight. Silas had called once since their last meeting. Just a voicemail. "You're doing more than I ever could from a boardroom. You're rewriting altitude into attitude. Keep flying." She saved the message, listened to it again that night, then again. Then she cried not from weakness, but from weight, from carrying a story that wasn't just hers, but everyone's who'd ever been unseen at 36,000 feet. The flight was running late. Silas Grant sat at Gate C11 in Atlanta Hartsfield, reading the boarding display without urgency. He had learned that the best things in air travel and in life took time. Across from him, a mother struggled with a toddler who kept dropping a stuffed dinosaur. To Silas, it wasn't a nuisance. It was a moment. Real, human. A reminder that flight wasn't just about engines or altitude. It was about lives, constantly in motion. He glanced down at the worn boarding pass in his hand. A377. To Seattle. This was his final observation. Leg silent, anonymous, deliberate. The last thread in a weave years in the making. On board, Bria Collins was preparing service carts, trying to fight back the weight in her chest. She'd barely slept the night before. After the talk with Kendra, memories had resurfaced her first year on flights, when a passenger accused her of stealing his headphones. He'd thrown them in her face 5 minutes later, claiming he'd found them after all, without apology. The supervisor had told her to be the bigger person. She had, but it had never left her. Today, though, felt different. Maybe because Kendra had believed her. Maybe because Silas's story, though never told, in full now echoed across the fleet like folklore. Or maybe because she was tired of hiding her strength just to make others comfortable. She looked at her reflection in the galley steel, eyes steady, shoulders back. Let's fly. Midway through the flight, Bria was helping a nervous older man store his cane under the seat. He smiled shyly and whispered, "First time flying since '92. Bria knelt beside him. "We'll make it a good one." Across the aisle. Silas overheard the exchange. He smiled, unseen. There it was again. The thing he'd hoped for. Not just change, but continuity, from one heart to the next. Back in Chicago, Monica Reese was reviewing new feedback reports. One line stopped her cold Bria C. Provided exceptional empathy and care to our elderly traveler in 7B. She made my father feel like flying was safe again. Monica leaned back, hand over her mouth, then hit send on a note to Kendra. You were right. It's not about the cabin. It's about the carriage. And she's carrying it beautifully. As the plane began its descent, Silas felt a kind of stillness. Not just physical, spiritual. His life had been planes, runways, balance sheets, and silent recalibrations. But now, for the first time, he felt like the journey was more than the business. It was the people flying it forward. He closed his eyes. In his memory came flashes. The first time he'd seen his mother cry because they couldn't afford a plane ticket. The first seat upgrade he gave away to a soldier. The first time he had been mistaken for a janitor in a terminal he'd helped design. They were never the big things, just small truths, sewn together into something unshakable. When the aircraft landed, Silas waited for the aisle to clear. As Bria helped passengers disembark, he approached quietly. Miss Collins, he said, holding out a folded napkin. You dropped this? She blinked, confused. She hadn't dropped anything, but on the napkin, in neat handwriting, was a single sentence. The future of flight is in good hands. Keep carrying it. S.G. Back at Aerosky HQ the next day, Kendra Miles found the napkin taped above Bria's locker. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. The conference room at Aerosky HQ in Seattle was quiet. Sunlight streaked across a long walnut table. Framed black and white portraits of pioneering pilots and cabin crew lined the walls, each with a brass nameplate beneath. Today, the room felt different. It wasn't hosting a meeting. It was holding a moment. Kendra Miles, in a tailored navy blazer, stood at the head of the table. Beside her was Bria Collins, dressed in full uniform, trying hard not to wring her hands. She wasn't used to rooms like this, not yet. But something about Kendra's quiet presence calmed her. You okay, Kendra asked softly. Bria nodded. I think so. I don't want to say the wrong thing. Kendra smiled. That's the thing about telling the truth. There isn't a wrong version, just the one that's yours. Moments later, the doors opened. Silas Grant stepped in, flanked by board members and internal press. Bria's heart jumped. She hadn't seen him since the flight. He looked exactly the same kind, but unreadable. Unassuming, but unmistakably grounded. Silas nodded toward her. You good to speak, Ms.? Collins Bria hesitated, then stepped forward. She spoke not from a podium, but from where she stood. No script, just truth. When I first joined Aerosky, I thought being a flight attendant meant snacks, seat belts, and safety protocols. But it's more than that. It's carrying people's stories, some beautiful, some heartbreaking, and not letting the weight of that make you hard. Sometimes we're overlooked, judged by our faces, our voices, our names, our age, our skin. I used to shrink under that. But then I realized the aisle runs both ways. Every time someone judged me, I still served them with grace. Every time someone doubted my worth, I reminded them without words that I knew it already. Flying isn't just travel, it's transformation. And I'm honored to be a part of the crew that helps others rise. There was silence, the kind that demanded reverence. Then Silas spoke. What you said, Bria, is what we lost sight of. Somewhere between profit margins and seat maps. We forgot that flying used to mean hope. I've built runways around the world, but what matters most is who we let land safely on them. So today, we're doing something small, but I hope it echoes. Effective immediately. Aerosky is launching a leadership mentorship track led by current crew. Not MBA, not suits. People who serve in the aisles and understand the altitude of empathy. And we'll name it after someone who flew through bias with more poise than most executives ever find in their careers. He turned to Kendra. Kendra Miles. The program will be called the Miles Ahead Initiative. You'll be its first director. Kendra blinked. She'd never sought recognition. But this wasn't about her. It was about lifting others. She nodded. I'll carry it forward. And just like that, something shifted. Not just in the room, but in the air. An airline had been changed not by a new fleet, but by a reminder of who they flew for and who flew them forward. That night, Bria sat on a rooftop patio with Kendra and Monica. They clinked glasses of ginger ale and lime. To first flights, Monica said. To last flights that teach you more than the first. Kendra replied. Bria looked out over the city skyline, then down at her phone. The napkin Silas had given her was framed now, tucked into a photo of her and her late grandmother, who had raised her. She whispered, just loud enough for them to hear, I think I finally know what it means to fly. 6 months later, the Aerosky Innovation Summit in San Diego drew media from across the aviation world. It wasn't just about aircraft anymore, it was about culture, change, and people. At the center of it all was the newest keynote, Bria Collins. She stood on a gently lit stage. Behind her, a screen that pulsed with a soft blue skyline and the words, "The runway is ours." There was no trembling in her voice now, just calm fire. 6 months ago, I was just a name on a roster, one face among hundreds in a crew manual. And yet, one encounter, one conversation reshaped not just my path, but our airline's future. Not because I fought back with rage, but because I stayed soft where the world expected steel and found strength in that softness. Because I carried grace even when I was being judged by my seat, my skin, or my silence. This isn't just about me. It's about every passenger who has been overlooked, and every crew member who was told to smile when they wanted to scream. We're rewriting what first class means, and it starts with first class dignity. The applause was long. Some stood, some cried. In the wings, Kendra Miles watched with pride. And next to her, in a simple suit, hands clasped, stood Silas Grant smiling quietly. The day ended with Bria walking out to the runway behind the hangar. The tarmac stretched endlessly under a golden sky. She heard footsteps behind her. Monica, Kendra, a handful of new recruits from the Miles Ahead Initiative, each one with a story, each one ready to fly it forward. Bria turned to them. You all ready? One nervous recruit, a young man named Elias, acted. Ready for what she smiled, lifting her chin toward a distant aircraft preparing for takeoff. To prove that dignity is more than a slogan, that kindness can be protocol, that the runway, it belongs to us, crew, passengers, everyone, and no one gets left behind at the gate because of how they look, speak, or walk onto the plane. They walked toward the aircraft, sun hitting the silver fuselage like it was made of purpose. Behind them, Silas stood still. He let the wind from a nearby engine whip past him. He closed his eyes, remembering the humiliation he had endured in silence years ago. The dismissive glance, the forced smile that wasn't kindness. But now he could see the change, not in a press release, but in people. He turned and walked toward his car. His assistant caught up with him. Heading to the terminal, Mr. Grant. He paused, looked once more at the aircraft, then smiled. "No, I think I'll take the long way today. Just needed to see her fly. Sometimes the most powerful people say the least, and sometimes a simple act of kindness or cruelty can echo louder than engines in the sky." Silas Grant didn't need revenge. He didn't need attention. He needed change, and he made it happen without ever raising his voice. What started as an insult in first class became a revolution in the aisle hanks to a man who believed dignity isn't about what seat you're in, but how you treat those around you. And Bria Collins, she reminded us all that even when the world tries to put you in a box, you can still rise above it. Wings wide open. This isn't just a story about a plane. It's about what flies when we choose respect over assumptions. It's about calling out discrimination and lifting up those who carry grace through the turbulence. If this story left a mark on your heart, let it leave a mark on the world, too. Share it. Like it. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that fly deeper than the headlines. Because the sky belongs to all of us, and every seat deserves respect.